I remember my childhood like it was yesterday. The smell of my dad's aftershave, the sound of his keys jingling as he came home from work. I'm Alice, and this is my story. I was born into what you'd call an ordinary family. Mom, Dad, and me. But from the get-go, it was clear who my favorite was. Dad. He was my hero, my everything. Every day, I'd wait by the window, my nose pressed against the glass, waiting for his car to pull up. The moment I saw him, I'd bolt to the door, ready to jump into his arms. "There's my little princess," he'd say, scooping me up and spinning me around. I'd giggle, burying my face in his neck, breathing in that familiar scent that meant safety and love. Mom? Well, she was there. Physically, at least. Emotionally? Not so much. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this weird expression, like I was some kind of burden she hadn't signed up for. But Dad made up for it. Every evening, rain or shine, we'd go for walks. He'd point out different trees, teach me about birds, or just let me ramble on about my day at kindergarten. Bedtime was the best. Dad would tuck me in, pull out a book, and transport us both to magical worlds. His voice would change for each character, making me laugh or gasp in all the right places. But when I turned 5, everything changed. I remember the day they sat me down. Mom looked relieved, Dad looked heartbroken. "Alice, honey," Dad started, his voice cracking. "Mommy and Daddy, we're not going to be living together anymore." I didn't understand at first. "Like when you go on business trips?" I asked. Mom cut in, her voice flat. "No, Alice, we're getting divorced. But don't worry, you'll be staying with your father. It's better this way." I looked at Dad, tears welling up in his eyes. He pulled me close, and I could feel him shaking. He said everything would be okay, but even at 5, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The divorce hit me hard, but Dad did his best to make things normal. We moved to a new neighborhood with a good school nearby. I remember the day we arrived at our new house. "What do you think, Alice?" Dad asked, his eyes hopeful. I looked at the unfamiliar building and felt a lump in my throat. "It's big," I managed to say. Dad knelt down beside me. "I know it's different, sweetheart. But we'll make it our home together, okay?" I nodded, trying to be brave for him. The new school was okay, I guess. I made some friends, but I missed my old life. Dad tried to keep our routines, walks in the evening, bedtime stories, but something had changed. There was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Mom? She became like a ghost in my life. She'd call sometimes, her voice distant and distracted. "How's school, Alice?" she'd ask, but I could tell she didn't really care about the answer. Once in a while, she'd take me for a weekend. It was always awkward, like we were strangers forced to spend time together. I'd come home to Dad, relief washing over me as I stepped through the door. One day, when I was 6, Dad sat me down with a serious look on his face. "Alice, honey, I've got some news," he said, fidgeting with his hands. "I've met someone. Her name is Sarah, and, well, we're getting married. Sarah is nice, I promise. You'll like her." I didn't want to like her. I wanted things to stay as they were, just me and Dad. But life had other plans. Sarah moved in, and suddenly our quiet house was full of noise and change. She tried to be nice, always smiling too brightly, asking too many questions. "Alice, sweetie, what would you like for dinner?" she'd ask, her voice syrupy sweet. "Whatever," I'd mutter, retreating to my room. Then came the biggest change of all. I was in the living room, watching TV, when Dad and Sarah came in, both grinning from ear to ear. "Alice, we have wonderful news," Sarah gushed. "You're going to be a big sister." I looked at Dad, hoping to see some sign that this was a joke. But he was beaming, his hand on Sarah's stomach. "Isn't it great, princess?" he said. "You'll have a little brother or sister to play with." I forced a smile, but inside, I felt like screaming. A baby? How could he do this? Didn't he love me enough? Months passed, and Sarah's belly grew bigger. Dad spent more and more time fussing over her, buying baby things, talking about names. I felt like I was fading into the background. The day the baby was born, I was left with a neighbor. When Dad finally came to get me, he looked exhausted but happy. "Come meet your baby brother, Alice," he said. At the hospital, I peered into the crib at the tiny, red-faced bundle. I looked at the baby, then at Dad, who was gazing at his new son with such love it made my heart hurt. Life changed fast after Tommy was born. Dad was completely wrapped up in his new family, and I felt like I was fading into the background. The walks, the bedtime stories, the special moments, they all disappeared, replaced by diaper changes and late-night feedings. Sarah, my stepmother, barely hid her annoyance with me. I'd catch her giving me these looks, like I was some unwanted houseguest who'd overstayed my welcome. One day, I overheard her talking to Dad in the kitchen. "John, why don't we see if Alice's mother wants her back? It might be better for everyone." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad's voice was sharp when he replied, "Absolutely not. Alice is my daughter, and this is her home. I expect you to treat her like your own." After that, Sarah was careful not to say anything outright mean to me, but the damage was done. I knew where I stood in her eyes, a burden, an obstacle to her perfect little family. As the years went by, I learned to fend for myself. Dad was always busy with Tommy, teaching him to walk, to talk, attending his little league games. I grew up in the shadows, becoming fiercely independent out of necessity. High school graduation came and went. Dad, true to his word, paid for my college tuition. "It's from the money your mom's been sending all these years," he explained. "I'd been saving it for your education." I was surprised. I'd assumed Mom had just disappeared from my life completely. But I was grateful for the chance to get away, to start fresh in a new city. College flew by. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. I graduated with a degree in financial management, feeling proud and accomplished. But when I returned home, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. The house felt different, smaller somehow. Sarah greeted me with a tight smile. "Oh, Alice, you're back. We weren't expecting you so soon." I lugged my bags upstairs, only to find my childhood bedroom completely transformed. Where my bed used to be, there was now a treadmill. My desk had been replaced by a huge TV and gaming console. The walls, once covered in my posters, were now bare. "Tommy needed a rec room," Sarah explained, not even trying to sound apologetic. "You can sleep on the couch in the living room. It's just temporary, right?" I stood there, staring at the stranger my room had become, feeling more out of place than ever. "Right," I mumbled. "Temporary." The job search was tough, but I finally landed an entry-level position at a local firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. Every night, I'd scour apartment listings, looking for something, anything, I could afford. "Maybe you could find a roommate," Dad suggested one evening, in a rare moment of attention. "Split the rent?" I nodded, adding another search parameter to my list. But decent, affordable apartments with potential roommates were hard to come by. So, I stayed. Every morning, I'd wake up on that uncomfortable couch, tiptoe around Tommy's toys scattered across the living room floor, and head to work. Every evening, I'd come back to Sarah's cold stares and Dad's distracted nods. Months dragged on, and I was still stuck in limbo, sleeping on the couch and searching for a way out. Tommy had started high school, and suddenly the house was abuzz with excitement, but not for me. "John, darling," Sarah cooed one evening, her voice sickly sweet. "Don't you think Tommy needs a car? All his friends are driving now." I nearly choked on my dinner. Tommy was barely 15, for crying out loud. Dad, ever the pushover when it came to his precious son, nodded. "You're right, honey. We'll go car shopping this weekend." And just like that, Tommy got a shiny new car. Never mind that he couldn't legally drive it yet. I bit my tongue, trying to swallow the bitterness rising in my throat. My birthday rolled around a few weeks later. For once, I decided to ask for something. I approached Dad cautiously. "Hey, Dad? I was wondering, could I maybe get a laptop for my birthday? I could pick up some freelance work online, make some extra money." Before Dad could respond, Sarah swooped in, her face twisted with anger. "A laptop? Are you serious, Alice? You're already living here rent-free, eating our food, and now you want more?" Her voice dripped with venom. "You're nothing but a money-grubbing freeloader." I stood there, shocked into silence, as she continued her tirade. "Have you no shame? Your father just paid for your entire college education, and here you are, asking for more expensive gifts." She was on a roll now, tears springing to her eyes in a dramatic display. What about Tommy's future? At this rate, he'll never be able to go to college, because his greedy sister is bleeding us dry. "Sarah, that's enough." Dad's voice cut through her performance. "We have a separate account for Tommy's college fund. It's all taken care of, so please, calm down." Sarah huffed and stormed out of the room, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Dad sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'm sorry about that, Alice. We'll talk about the laptop later, okay?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As soon as I could, I escaped to the backyard, needing some air. Sitting on the old swing set, I let the tears I'd been holding back fall freely. Sarah's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. I wiped my eyes, a new resolve settling over me. I wouldn't ask for anything ever again. I'd find a way to make it on my own, without their help or their judgment. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, life decided to prove me wrong. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when all hell broke loose. Dad burst into the living room, his face red with fury. "Where is it?" he bellowed, making me jump. "Where's my damn money?" Sarah and Tommy came running, eyes wide with shock. I sat there, frozen, as Dad continued his tirade. "Someone's been using my card. The one for Tommy's college fund." He was pacing now, hands shaking. "Jewelry stores, electronics. Who the hell's been spending my money?" His eyes landed on me, narrowing with suspicion. "Alice, did you take my cards? Have you been in my wallet?" I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. "What? No, Dad, I would never." But he wasn't listening. He was on a rampage, tearing through the room like a tornado. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "John, check her backpack. It's right there." Before I could protest, Dad grabbed my bag. I watched in horror as he dumped its contents onto the couch. Books, papers, pens, and there, gleaming in the midst of it all, was a brand new laptop. The room fell silent. I stared at the laptop, my mind reeling. I hadn't bought this. Dad's voice was dangerously low. "You thieving little..." "Dad, no. I didn't do this," I pleaded, panic rising in my throat. "I don't know where that came from." "And jewelry? Why would I buy jewelry? Call the police. Check the store cameras. You'll see it wasn't me." But my words fell on deaf ears. Sarah stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "John, can't you see? She has no respect for you. She's lying to your face, even with the evidence right in front of her." She turned to me, eyes glinting with triumph. "We should have known you'd do something like this. Always wanting more, never satisfied with what you have." Dad's next words hit me like a physical blow. "Get out." "What?" I whispered, not believing what I was hearing. "Get out of my house," he roared. "You ungrateful. I never want to see you again. Get your things and leave now." Numbly, I gathered what I could. Clothes, toiletries, my phone charger. It all went into a duffel bag I found in the closet. The whole time, Dad stood there, watching me with a mixture of anger and disgust that broke my heart. As I headed for the door, Sarah's parting shot hit me. "We should have done this years ago. Good riddance to bad rubbish." The door slammed behind me, and just like that, I was alone. Homeless. Accused of a crime I didn't commit. As the reality of my situation sank in, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The house behind me had stopped being a home long ago. Maybe this was the push I needed to truly start my own life. That first night after being kicked out was a blur. I found myself in a dingy hostel, clutching my duffel bag like a lifeline. Sleep eluded me as I lay on the lumpy mattress, my mind racing with unanswered questions and fear for the future. The next day at work, I must have looked as lost as I felt. My colleague, Jessica, cornered me in the break room. "All right, spill it. What's going on with you?" she demanded, her concern evident. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole sordid story. Jessica listened, her eyes widening with each new detail. "That's insane," she said when I finished. Then, without missing a beat, "Move in with me. I've been looking for a roommate anyway. We can split the rent. It'll be perfect." And just like that, I had a lifeline. I moved in with Jessica that weekend, grateful beyond words for her kindness. 2 years passed in a whirlwind. I threw myself into work, determined to prove to myself, and everyone else, that I could make it on my own. I didn't speak to Dad at all during this time. The pain of his betrayal was still too raw. Mom tried to reach out a few times, but our conversations were strained. It was clear Dad had told her about the alleged theft. Her disappointment was palpable, even over the phone. Eventually, those calls stopped too. But life has a way of moving forward, whether you're ready or not. I got promoted at work, started earning enough to consider my own place. I picked up new hobbies, yoga, painting, anything to keep my mind occupied. I even started dating again, though nothing serious. Finally, I took the plunge and rented my own apartment. It was small, but it was mine. No judgmental stares, no walking on eggshells. Just peace and independence. I was just settling into my new routine when the unexpected happened. There was a knock at my door one Saturday afternoon. I opened it, and there stood Dad. He looked older, more haggard than I remembered. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. "Can I come in?" he choked out. "Your mother gave me the address. Alice, I need to talk to you." I stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to throw him out like he'd done to me. But another part, a part one thought I'd buried, wanted desperately to hear what he had to say. Dad took a deep breath. "I found out what really happened 2 years ago," he began, his voice shaking. It wasn't you. It was Sarah." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What?" He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "She framed you. She's the one who took my credit cards, who bought all that stuff. I found jewelry, clothes, all hidden away in her things. Price tags still on them and everything." I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Dad's words washed over me, each one a mix of vindication and reopened wounds. I sat there, stunned, as Dad continued his story. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and regret as he recounted the events that led to this moment. "After I found the jewelry, I started paying closer attention," he said, running a hand through his graying hair. "One night, I caught Sarah red-handed, going through my wallet. She was taking my credit cards, Alice." I felt a lump form in my throat. All this time, I'd been right. But the vindication tasted bitter. Dad went on, his words tumbling out faster now. "I confronted her, and it all came spilling out. She's been shopping compulsively for years. At first, she said it was all for Tommy. But now? She's maxed out credit cards, taken out loans, all for stuff we don't need." I shook my head, disbelief warring with a perverse sense of satisfaction. "And the laptop? The one you found in my bag?" Dad's face crumpled. "She planted it there. Bought it with my card and slipped it into your things. God, Alice, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you." The apology hung in the air between us, heavy and insufficient. "I told her she needed help," Dad continued. "Begged her to see a therapist, to get treatment for her shopping addiction. But she refused. Said there was nothing wrong with her. I could picture it, Sarah, defiant and unapologetic. Just like she'd been the day they kicked me out. And then, Dad's voice dropped to a near whisper. She said she was right to frame you. That she'd do it again if she had the chance. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the couch, steadying myself. That was it for me, Dad said. I filed for divorce the next day. Kicked her out of the house. I couldn't live with someone who'd hurt my daughter like that. He looked at me then, his eyes pleading. Alice, I know I don't deserve it, but please, can you forgive me? I was blind, and stupid, and I hurt you so badly. I'm so sorry. I stared at him, this man who had once been my hero. The father who'd read me bedtime stories and taught me to ride a bike. The same father who'd thrown me out without a second thought, who'd believed the worst of me so easily. For a moment, I was that scared, heartbroken girl again, standing on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. The pain of that betrayal washed over me anew. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't forgive you. Not now, maybe not ever. You didn't just kick me out. You believed I could do something so terrible. You didn't even try to hear my side. And for 2 years, Dad, you didn't call, didn't check if I was okay. Dad nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand, he choked out. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I needed you to know the truth. I stood up, suddenly needing space. Thank you for telling me, but I think you should go now. As the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, emotions overwhelming me. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like reopening a wound that had never really healed. After Dad left, I thought I'd finally have peace. But life had other plans. My phone started ringing incessantly, Mom, trying to play peacemaker. Alice, honey, she'd plead, your father is truly sorry. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him? Each call left me more frustrated than the last. Mom, please. I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But she wouldn't let up. One evening, I opened my door to find both my parents standing there. What are you doing here? I demanded, anger bubbling up inside me. Mom pushed past me into the apartment, Dad trailing behind looking sheepish. Alice, this has gone on long enough, she started, her voice stern. Your father made a mistake, but he's apologized. You have no right to hold this grudge. Think of all the good things he's done for you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No right? He kicked me out. He believed I was a thief. Where was all this support when I was sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to rebuild my life? Mom opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. No, I'm done. Both of you, please leave. And don't come back. If you keep pushing this, I'll get a restraining order. I mean it. The shock on their faces would have been comical if the situation wasn't so painful. Mom looked like she wanted to yell, but Dad put a hand on her arm. We understand, Alice, he said quietly. We'll go. But I'll be here when you're ready. If you're ever ready. As the door closed behind them, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. I sank onto my couch, desperate for some peace to heal. Weeks passed. Life went on. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the mundane routine of everyday life. One day, while grabbing coffee, I spotted a familiar face, Sarah, my ex-stepmother. She was leaving a casino, phone pressed to her ear. I know I owe you, I overheard her say, but I'm sure I'll win it back this time. Just need a little more time. I ducked out of sight, a mix of pity and satisfaction washing over me. Her actions had cost her everything, yet she was still in denial. Tommy, my stepbrother, occasionally sent me text messages. Short, awkward exchanges that never went deep. He was in college now, trying to forge his own path. Like me, he seemed to be keeping his distance from the family drama. Months turned into a year. I met someone, Mark. Kind, funny, understanding Mark. As our relationship grew serious, he asked about my family. I told him everything. "Wow," he said, holding me close. "You've been through so much. Whatever you decide about your parents, I'm here for you." Now, as I sit here twirling the engagement ring on my finger, I'm faced with a decision I never thought I'd have to make. Our wedding is months away, and I still don't know if I want my parents there. Part of me wants to extend an olive branch, to see if we can build something new from the ashes of our old relationship. Another part is terrified of letting them back in, of making myself vulnerable again. I look at the save the date cards on my coffee table, 2 envelopes set aside, one for Mom, one for Dad. My pen hovers over them, indecision paralyzing me. In the end, I set the pen down. I'm not ready to make this decision yet, and that's okay. I've learned that healing takes time, and forgiveness can't be forced.